We all set?
Should be good.
All right, I'd like to call to order this Board of Finance special meeting for Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. I'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before we formally start the meeting, I'd like to welcome our new member, Ryan, to the board. I look forward to working with you, and the whole team looks forward to working with you.
Thanks, Glenn. I look forward to working with the rest of the team as well.
And do you know the oath that you got to state before we start the meeting?
Glenn, I don't believe I was sent that packet with the charter or the oath.
It's all good, Ryan. We're good. You can thank your friend Ricky for that one.
Thanks a lot, Rick. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
I had a feeling.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
All right, let's go right into public comment. Hearing none, we can move on. We had no communication or correspondence. Brianna?
Sorry about that. I make a motion to approve the July 22nd and August 2nd special meeting minutes.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Ryan, on this, generally, unless you read the minutes, you would abstain. If you're not able to attend the meeting, but you understand the minutes and have no problem, you could make a vote. So when I raise the vote, you have those options, okay?
Okay.
All right, any discussion on these? Hearing none, I'd like to bring it to vote. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those against? Do I have an abstention?
Aye.
Perfect. Thank you. Steve, I think that brings us to you.
Yeah, that's the quickest I think we've ever gotten to my report. So on the streetscapes, phase 3, we finally got approval from DOT Region 4 about 2 weeks ago to move ahead. And we can't award a contract until we get DOT approval. And they sat on it since February. So we ran into the problem of, will we have enough time to order the granite and also be able to do the asphalt, the macadam? Will the plants close before we're ready to actually pave? The granite for the edging takes a minimum of 8 weeks. It's usually 12 weeks. So that's 3 months from now. So what we decided to do is to hold off phase 3 until next spring, issue an order to proceed to the contractor, which is Grasso Companies, and we're trying to get them to buy as many supplies as they can right now. And it looks like we can get the electrician on the job to buy the materials now and store them for us until the spring. Given the price increases we've seen in electrical, wood, other things, we think that's a pretty reasonable thing to do. The granite people have said at most we'll have an increase of approximately 5% next year. The problem with the granite, it would be cheaper, believe it or well, because it's so heavy. We thought of buying the granite now, bringing it to the town, storing it here, and then moving it to site. That would be more expensive than just buying it and having it delivered if it goes up 5% next year. So we'll probably order that in the January timeframe, and then they'll be able to go in the end of March, April timeframe. We estimate it will take 6 to 8 weeks to do the work. It's not a big project, and we're well under budget on that too. On phase 4, which goes from the Four Corners, the intersection, up to Newberry Village, we've gotten the preliminary design to DOT. It's gone back and forth twice between them and us. We're meeting with them next week on site to have a discussion, and we'll be bringing in Ralph Tedesco, Jay Purcell, and a couple of other people to have a conversation with the DOT And once we nail that down, if we nail it down and DOT doesn't, even if they take 5 months to approve, we'll still be ready to go out in the January timeframe for a bid and hopefully do the work next spring also. And phase 5 is a phase that we were thinking of combining with phase 3, but decided to hold off because that's the intersection where the new supermarket is going across the Still River Greenway, where they have the new driveway. We're going to wait until they complete all of that work, and we'll probably combine it in phase 4 or phase 3 if we're doing it next year. And it's all lots of money, so that's good. The assisted living on Federal Road, down just below Ramen House, tells us they're going to be open for residents in November. So they're moving pretty quickly with that. Our new librarian that we hired will be coming on board next week, the 23rd. It comes from Florida, where she was the head librarian for a county with 5 libraries reporting to her. Very nice, very smart. I think she's going to be a good librarian. The new school is on target. We're right where we want to be. We're still under budget. Everything is going well. The only problem we've had so far, major problem we've had so far, is the soils we've discussed before, where we had to take out a lot more soil than we thought because it just wasn't good to build on. That's going really well. And we're still on target to do everything we need to do. We may have a problem with snow removal, but once we've got all the details on that, we'll come back to you on that. The water line on Candlewood Lake Road is also ahead of schedule. And luckily, we have actually hit no ledge whatsoever. It's been dirt all the way up the entire road. And we had allowed for some ledge to be in there because Brookfield's full of ledge. So that is also significantly under budget and ahead of schedule. We should have, I don't know if you've been up Candlewood Lake Road, it's about 2/3 of the way completed already in like 3 weeks. So that's going really well. One of the issues we're going to have to discuss, and we may ask funding for, is about 40 towns in Connecticut have been hit by ransomware attacks in the last 2 years. These attacks are getting more sophisticated and they're becoming more frequent. I cannot tell you how many towns had to pay anything. They don't release that information. Well, I wish they would, but it's clear I'm getting these phishing, I'm sure you all are too, at least once or twice a week. I'm getting these phishing campaigns via email, and some of them are very sophisticated. We want to implement MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, on both the town's computers and on the school's computers. And we start primarily with those computers and laptops that go off-site. They seem to be the most vulnerable ones. And we want to include every single person in that. And once we have final details, the cost, I think, will be manageable. And Marshall will talk a little bit more about that. We're applying for Sustainable Connecticut. We have it now on the bronze level. We've got a group of high school students who have worked with Greg Dembowski in our town, a project manager, to get us to the silver level. And Sustainable Connecticut is you do things that are sustainable in your town. It's all the things you think of: recycling, watching your lights, changing light fixtures, that thing. But it's also, there's about 200 items that you can do on it, many of them at not much cost at all, just a little bit of thinking. And so we're going to try to get a silver level on that. I don't know if you've all seen the census data that came out. The raw data shows that Brookfield population is up about 6.5%. Interestingly enough, our school age population went down, which is interesting. The paper asked me why I thought that was, and the only thing I can think of is that people are having less children. They're not having 3 or 4 children, they're having 1 or 2. Because you would think if your population went up, your school age population would at least stay steady or grow slightly, but it hasn't. And we've actually seen, our kindergarten classes are chock full right now. The guidance is 19 students per class. We're at 20 and 21 right now per class. If we get 15 kids show up at the last minute, we may need to have another, class. I don't think that'll happen, but it's something we have to think about. Coming up is LOTSIP. The state is going to be issuing new LOTSIP grants. Probably, they're not giving a specific time frame, but we're thinking November. It will be slightly changed from the old LOTSIP, but LOTSIP is the most preferred program to apply for grants under. It's the easiest, it's the fastest, it's the most encompassing if you're doing the local capital improvement plan for transportation. So we're knocking around some ideas right now on what we could use LOTSIP grants for. There is no limit on how many LOTSIP grants you can apply for. So it's a pretty open program, and we're looking forward to that. And I think that's pretty much it. Oh, we did issue an order for mask mandates in town, along with the 5 surrounding towns with Brookfield: Danbury, Bethel, Newtown, New Fairfield, Ridgefield, and Reading. That was primarily driven by the fact that our number of cases in 3 weeks rose dramatically. We're going to watch this as we go along. I mean, I understand people don't want to wear masks, but we have to keep people safe. And the governor has issued an order that masks will stay in place for the schools at least until September 30th. And what he's going to do after that, I don't know. The powers that are granted me under the governor's executive orders and the town's executive emergency declaration expire coterminous with the governor's. So September 30th is the last day that, for now, unless something changes, that I can even order a mask mandate. So it's about 38 days from now.
Steve, I saw an article today that the southeastern Connecticut, whatever SCOG, actually wrote a letter, 20 of the 22 towns, asking for Governor Lamont to issue a statewide mask mandate. Is our WestCog comprised of a lot of Litchfield County smaller towns also, or is it mostly southern?
The only two Litchfield County, Sherman and Litchfield, it is, isn't it? Sherman and New Milford are the only towns that are in WestCog. Could have been Swarpo, the southwestern eastern Connecticut group.
I thought it was
Darien.
I don't know. Mashantucket was part of it also.
Yeah, that's not us. I know a lot of first selectmen and mayors and cities have gone to the governor and said, listen, you need to make a decision here. Do you do it for the whole state or don't do it? It seems kind of silly that New Milford is not doing it. We are. And the risk is the same. We should do this as a team. And that's why the 5 towns surrounding Danbury decided to do it together, to at least get some kind of like herd agreement on doing this. As you can imagine, my phone has been going off the hook. One person told me yesterday that more people have died from the vaccine than from the virus in the United States. It gets really difficult when people do not want to deal with the true facts. It's really difficult, but we'll work our way through it. And that's it for me.
Steve, are you worried that, with Newtown and New Milford not adopting the mandate that, people go to those towns to do business instead of coming to Brookfield? Is that something, and have you talked to those selectmen? Are they considering maybe joining us?
I think, excuse me, Ryan, that could be a concern. When I talk to business owners in town, they don't see a change in their business. Good. If you're walking into Costco, I was in there the other day, you walk in, you got your mask on, you're there for 20 minutes. This is not a huge imposition. We're not asking you to take an SAT test in order to go into a store. We're asking you to protect others and your families. And so I don't think you see a lot of that. The cross business between Brookfield and New Milford. I know, like, personally, my wife shops at ShopRite and sometimes goes over to Bethel.
Right.
It doesn't affect her either way. She does it according to what she needs to buy. So I don't think we'll see. I don't see it, and I don't hear it from the business owners that they're worried about losing business to anyone else.
Good.
Any other questions? All right. I don't see that we have a BOE representative tonight. Is there one online?
They have a board meeting tonight as well.
Perfect. So then that means you can carry us into the next. Marcia, please.
All right. So we're in between years here that we have, let me figure out how to get this to switch here. There we go. You should have received a written report for our economic indicators, our revenue for July, and our expenditures versus budget for July. There wasn't anything to report. That nothing was really notable. That we had a great collections month, I think, for taxes, and that was really about all that was significant in there. Anyone have any questions on that? All right. But the big thing that we're working on is year-end 2021. Every month we've done projections on the revenues that we assumed all the expenditures were made, because that's all we can, unless we knew specifically otherwise. With the revenues, I'm sorry, we're not to revenues yet. We're working on closing the fiscal year. And the way we do that is we close a lot of the little funds first that, I call them little funds. Some are more complex, like a lot of them have subledgers. So the bonded capital, we think we have final numbers there. We've sent it out to the department heads to make sure the numbers match their expectations. The elementary school construction, we've tentatively closed that. Heart and hypertension, the town grant fund and all the subledgers of all the different grants, outside services, asset forfeiture, open space, and capital non-recurring, and all those subledgers. Those we have just out to the department heads. And so there may be small changes. We don't expect much changes there. The general fund, I typed this yesterday to say that we paid our last invoices yesterday and then a new one came in today. But we're essentially closing that. Anything else that comes in, we're just going to say it's immaterial and it's got to go into this year's budget. And our goal is to have the statements for each of the funds completed by September 30th. That is time to start working on the rest for the of the financial statements, the notes, and the other financial information in time for the auditors.
The 30th or the 3rd? Whoa, Marcia, you have the 3rd on here, right?
The 3rd, September 3rd, sorry.
You said the 30th, right?
Oh, sorry, I said the 30th and that was wrong.
Okay,
It's
thank
the
you.
3rd. It's the Friday before Labor Day, I believe.
Thank you.
The numbers, they just give me a headache here. That the revenues, that the general fund revenues, that taxes, we can't close. The way the taxes work, it's called a modified accrual basis, and essentially it's like a cash basis, except it goes out 30 days. So we have to add the collections for July and August to revenue, and we have to subtract last year's July and August. So the key is, are the revenues this year, July and August, higher or lower than last year? And right now it looks like they'll be coming in higher, but we still have a few more days before we can make that and do the final calculation. So we projected that we were going to be 665,000 over budget on revenues. If you remember, we scaled everything back based on when we were doing the budget, the revenue budget last year. It was right at the beginning, the first 6 weeks of COVID, and everything stopped. And it didn't continue that way, but that's all the data we had at the time. So we projected that we'll be 665 over budget in tax revenues. Right now we're 600 with the final adjustment with July and August. It looks like we'll meet the 665. License and permits, that's primarily.
Hold off there for a second. That's a level of detail that we don't get into in our budgeting. And if we're increasing taxes by a percent or so every year, then every July should be higher than the previous year, right?
It's back tax collections.
You're talking about back tax, you're not talking about, okay.
Correct. It's just the back tax collections. I'm sorry, I
Alright.
should have clarified that.
Okay, gotcha.
The licenses and permits that those should be finalized. We're 300,000 over budget. We had projected that we would be about 240 the last time we projected, so we're doing better than what we had expected. Intergovernmental
Well,
revenues.
before you go to that, Marcia, so now those items there account for $1,000,001, right? Over. We had 665 on the taxes and we're 540 over on the licenses. So that's 1 point something million in extra revenue, correct?
Yep, and I do have the tally at the end.
Okay.
Because I don't show everything on here. We know that our interest sucked and that went, that was well under budget. So you're not going to be able to add this up to get to it.
Okay.
But I do have the total at the end.
All right.
Intergovernmental revenues, FEMA for the storm on August 4th of last year, that right now that is on hold because they have to check about the bats and the trees and you know, if there were bats in the neighboring trees, that's going to be a problem and they're not going to be able to reimburse us. So all that is on hold. We sent in a claim for 280,000 to FEMA and we don't know where it's going to end up. They had thought that it would take 30 days, which 30 days is coming up at the end of the month, but it's FEMA, so we just don't know. So that one is in limbo. FEMA for the vaccines and some reopening costs, we should get 100% reimbursement, and we just have to do those reports. The vaccines were about 60,000. We think we might get another 60,000 in reopening costs, but we have not gotten to filing those claims yet. LOSEP, we have extra LOSEP money that I thought I had caught us up when I came in. There was one that said that it was obligated. I thought we had it and we didn't. So I was able to, they said, oh, it's expiring, and we claimed it. That unfortunately their form talks about available and not available. And they have it as not available whether if you've filed an application and don't have the cash, or if you've had the cash. So that is, we've got all that reconciled, but it did give us some more money this year. COVID funding, we talked about maybe moving it into the grant fund for just the strategy on the statements and the debt bubble and maximizing our fund balance, but we'll look at that when we've got the drafts pulled together. And that would be just pulling the revenue and the related expenditures out of the general fund and plunking it into the grants. Other revenues, the town clerk revenues are 315,000 over budget. That's the same as what we had projected in May. She's still going strong on her filings and the revenue that's coming into this year. She thought that in the last week or so it slowed down a little bit, but she's thought that before and it's just picked right back up again. Other revenue, miscellaneous revenue. In May, we thought we were going to be 38,000 over budget. Plus, we knew that there was a potential for a CCM rebate. CCM does our insurances, and they in June they meet to decide if they're going to give a rebate and how much. They did approve a rebate. It was $57,000, and we have now received that. And giving credit to them, they in COVID that they not only gave us a rebate, but they cut their fees in half. Their membership fees, not their insurance fees. We also received $44,000 in June for a controlling interest transfer tax. And I had to look up what that was. And that is, so it comes through the state and they just send us a check and a letter saying that they've collected it on our behalf. What it is if you have a partnership or an LLC that owns real estate. So let's say I have I own a big piece of property in an LLC. I can't get out of conveyance taxes by selling my interest in that partnership to Steve and then not pay any conveyance tax. So from what I read, this looks like it's essentially a conveyance tax type of thing. But we received 44,000 in June. We obviously didn't know it was coming. So right now it's looking like we're and then there were a few other small things that came in that looks like we're 141,000 over budget in that revenue. And then with the heart and hypertension fund, that anytime you have police, that you may have a heart and hypertension liability. There was a window of time, which that window is closed now, but a number of years ago, there is a window of time where police officers suffering from heart or hypertension issues could be paid like an insurance claim. We had 2 officers or former officers that were collecting from that fund. The liability is based on our insurance company's estimate of the costs that will be incurred. Then we take the present value of that. Unfortunately, one of the 2 passed away during the year. But for our financial reporting, we no longer have that liability out there. So we're going into the year, we were underfunded in that fund, and we were going to transfer 20,000 out. We don't need to transfer the 20,000. And we have an excess in the fund now because the liability is reduced of 95,000, and I would propose we move that back to the general fund. So in the totals, in May, we thought we were going to be 800,000 over budget. Right now, if I were to run a report, we're $1,060,000 over budget. But there's still going to be changes. We have to do the final taxes. We've got to do the FEMA revenue, or it could be a reduction. I guess I don't have that 260 in there yet, so it won't be a reduction. But FEMA, and then how we treat the COVID grants. But that's the best number we know right now. Any questions on any of that revenue stuff?
The COVID grants would be, because it was received, it would be 21. It would be in the, if we did do it now, it would be 21.
It's got to be measurable, available, and auditable. So they had said, our consultant on this 260 had said that that it would be 30 days. Everything has gone through the FEMA, it's the FEMA person, the FEMA project manager. Everything is good with her. It's now in this environmental group. She had said 30 days. If we can get that, if it really is 30 days and can get it approved, it would be measurable, available, and auditable. That's still up in the air. The other ones, the smaller ones, because they're so inundated with these COVID grants, they have told us that if it's not a major program, it does zip through pretty quickly. So it's just a timing game, and it's FEMA timing, so it's hard to say.
All right, so you're not talking about the recovery funds, you're talking about?
No.
Okay.
No, we're not talking about the recovery funds. We've received those. We've put them in a separate fund, and we've haven't picked them up as revenue. We've debited the cash, and we've credited unearned revenue.
Gotcha.
But they won't be in the general.
And that's 22.
That's 22. They were received, so we'll see them on the statements at 21. But there's no revenue in 21 until we decide what we're going to do with them, and start
You
doing
guys
this.
have been following this. We formed the ARPA committee with the liaisons from the board. We're going to be meeting with them. It's hard to get people during the summer and vacation towards the end of the month, give them their charge and let them go forward. We've got about an inch of material for them to go through, suggestions of what to do with that money. So they'll do that. And we've asked them to come back. We're going to ask them to come back to the boards by February. So 6 months with their suggestions as to what we should use that money for.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that this number is going to change, but for a limited number of reasons of why it might change. If we can pick it up as revenue because it's measurable, available, and auditable, we're gonna try to do that. For expenditures, and these numbers are through last week. That again, we're 99.9% done. That we have the unspent contingency. And then we also have departments that have extra money that we knew it would be extra because they can't go over their budget. It's just how much is extra, what purchase orders didn't get used. And so I made a list here of the departments that were over, that their underage of their budget was $10,000 or more, and kind of just a little explanation of why. IT was under, we had allocated money for them for COVID, for the meeting monitors, like what Dan Secor is doing tonight, that he's got some a troop of people that helps so that he doesn't have to do all the meetings. And we didn't use all that money for all the virtual meetings. Town clerk, we had a salary change where, not a change, but we had 2 retirements and we had some savings while the positions weren't filled. Registrars, there was one referendum that we didn't have to have, so we saved money there. The Conservation Commission, that we saved some money on the outside services there. Employee benefits, health insurance, we were a little bit under, and unemployment. We didn't have to pay unemployment because the federal government, with all this COVID stuff, gave us a bunch of credits. So we've been working off those credits throughout the year. Police, they were 40,000 under budget, but it was a lot of little savings in different lines. Emergency management, that that's where we had allocated some of the general COVID money that wasn't department by department, and we didn't end up using it. We had budgeted, for example, we were trying to do it quarterly, for the extra cleaning and the door monitor to be through June 30th, and they cut off sometime in May. Let's see, highway department, primarily due to salt savings with the low snow totals. Facilities, the timing of they were under that they were trying to replace an air conditioning unit in the hallway upstairs, or in separate that goes into the offices upstairs. And they were going out to bid. It didn't get done. We will be talking about that on the next page, just because we couldn't commit it with a signed contract by June 30th. So we couldn't qualify it as an encumbrance. Same as the oil tank replacement. Steve had talked to you about, there was some PCBs in the oil tank, and we were trying to get that done, but we had to go out to bid, and we couldn't get all the contract done by June 30th. Utilities, that we had some savings on electricity. The health department, we had allocated some money to them for different COVID costs, and they weren't all fully spent. Again, we did it through June 30th, and we ended our clinics beginning of June. Library, there were some salary savings because of turnover. The grounds that they had done some of the power washing in-house and saved some money, and they had very good luck on their equipment, that they didn't need some of the big ticket repairs that they normally need. And then we talked about the transfer to the Heart and Hypertension Fund due to the death of a claimant. So those are the where we've saved the money. That we're going to come next month and talk about potential transfers. That one of the things that we were working on is the middle school wall. And I don't know, Steve, if you want to talk more about that.
I can jump in on that. So we went out to bid to get some pricing to fix the wall. And our original estimate was around $50,000. We got one bid for $90,000. And then Paul Checo, the head of our MBC, said that he was over at the school and he saw, it's on one wall, and that wall wraps around and goes down the building. And he said he saw efflorescence at the top of the rest of the wall, which leads him to believe that there might be further problems with the brick wall, not just the one section that we took down. And so we stepped back and said, well, we got to look at this. We're going to have to hire an engineer to come in, look at this, get us a good idea of what the extent of the problem is. I don't think we want to do a temporary fix or just fix one part of the wall, and then in 2 years, other parts of the same wall start falling off. So we've stepped back a little bit. We want to hire an engineer to do a full study and then estimate the full cost of doing that work, and do it once, do it right, and make sure that it's going to be a job that will stay for a long time. On the oil tank, we talked about this, our recycling tank, somebody put PCBs in it, and we had to go out to bid on this. And we're also getting a lot of interest from the state's DEEP, Department of Environmental Protection. And so we have to walk very, very carefully on this and do it exactly right, because we don't want further liability if we don't handle this properly. And so that we're going to do. The air conditioning replacement Marcia talked about, we had a unit that's up in the hall in the upstairs at our end of the building. This air conditioning unit has broken down once or twice a summer for the last 3 or 4 summers, and it's leaking coolant, and it's leaking coolant in an area that we cannot get to. It's just not possible. The unit is 30 years old, so we'll probably have to replace that. But again, we don't have a final price. On blight remediation, we've talked about, I believe that the blight panel has ordered the demolition of 20 Station Road and 846 Federal Road. Those two properties are owned by the same owner. 20 Station Road, if you remember, we got a grant and did a remediation study for the dry cleaning chemicals from the business that was there for many years. The dry cleaning chemicals went into the ground, and then they formed a plume going up through Laurel Hill Road and across other properties. So the owners of the property did not demo the property in the 120 days we gave them. They did not apply for a permit. They did nothing. So we are going to go out to bid to hire a contractor to do the demo. But from that study we did back on the remediation, we know that there are PCBs in the glazing and the glass around the windows. There's lead and there's some other contaminants. Asbestos has already been taken out of the building, but our consultant in 2018 estimated the cost of demoing the building and remediating the PCBs and the lead and everything was about $120,000 to $125,000, and the cost to remediate the soils would be between $60,000 and $70,000. That was 3 years ago, so we think that cost will go up slightly. Plus, we're going to try to. Our end goal is to get this property fixed, get the building down, right, and hopefully get ownership of the property so we could use it as a parking lot. And so in order to do that, we do not want to buy this property. We do not want to foreclose on it and own it yet. because then we own the downstream liability for the other properties. The state has a program, they call it the ABC program, where the state will take over that downstream liability. And we can foreclose on the property, buy the property, and own it, and only own the problem on the property itself, 20 Station Road. That seems to us, after long discussions with attorneys, the way to go. No one wants to own this property because you don't want that downstream liability, which could be huge. You know, people could say, hey, you ruined my house. I've got vapors coming in from the dry cleaning chemicals. It caused medical problems for my child. You can just imagine what it could be. So to do that, it would cost around $245,000 to do all that work. If we do that, then we would immediately put a lien on the property for the $245,000 plus the over $50,000 in blight fines. We already have a lien on it for the blight fines. And so we would then foreclose to get paid, and hopefully we would take possession of the property. And
So Steve, before you go any farther.
Yeah.
You're gonna get paid the $290 or whatever it is and take ownership. So they're gonna pay us and we're gonna take ownership. Or in the long run, because the town's gonna become the owner, we gotta eat the $245, we gotta eat the $50, and then we gotta eat whatever the debit of the balances of the sale of the property or the value of the property.
So what we would do is we would either foreclose for our fees, right? And own the property, or put it up for tax sale, right? Because they're late on their taxes. I don't think anybody's going to buy the property. In its current condition, no one will buy the property. So we have to do this very, very carefully. We might, in taking the property, we would lose the $290,000 in fees and demo costs, right? But then we would own the property. So it would be as if we bought the property for $295,000, right? Does that make sense to you, Glenn?
Yeah, would there be any attorney fees too on this? I mean,
Yes.
so we'd be up in the 400,000 possibly.
No. With the attorney's fees will be, this is just normal foreclosure, normal closing costs, things like that. So
Okay.
probably $4,000 and $6,000 for those fees.
Okay.
Right
Thank you.
now.
How long does a foreclosure process take, especially with COVID now? Is it extended or?
It can take a significant amount of time, particularly if the owner tries to fight you. You know, it could be as little as 90 days in normal times, up to a year, 2 years, right? You just can't tell. Now, if we can come to an accommodation with them, that would be great too, and not even go to court, right? That's to be seen. And since it's a contract negotiation, if we wanted to discuss our efforts and what we want to do, we would want to go into executive session, which I would suggest we do when the town has more information that we can share and discuss with you guys.
Sounds good.
But the reason we've got these here is that they were all in process at June 30th. The first three we were hoping to encumber. What that means is to have a signed contract by June 30th. And just with the process and the bidding and the state, we couldn't achieve that at June 30th. And so what we'll ask for, we'll refine these numbers. And what we'll ask for next month is a transfer from where they were under it, the first three, where they were under in the budget, where we were going to put them, to capital, transfers to capital non-recurring. And then that budget in capital non-recurring carries forward to the next fiscal year, whereas the general fund budget stops at June 30th. But we'll ask for that next month, and you'll see it all laid out. Not that we were just telling you about it this month. And then the Board of Ed, that we're waiting for final numbers. They're closing out their numbers, and they go through the process. And I think they're reporting tonight to their board on where they stand. So we don't have those numbers quite yet. So
Do you have a feel for that?
it sounds like they're better than they thought they were, and will not need more money from us.
Okay.
Eileen, are you still attending some of those finance meetings?
I am attending all of the finance.
I have
committee.
missed a lot of them. They've
Gotcha.
coincided, unfortunately, with Boy Scout camping, vacation, camping with the kids. So I haven't made it to most of the last probably four
Understood.
or five. I'll get back to it next month.
Cool. Just curious.
Yeah.
Okay,
So any questions on this page?
nope.
And Ryan, if you want, I'd be happy to meet with you and just go through a quick overview of the financial statements. I know you're a business guy, but I always talk about, and when I audited New Canaan, that they were former managing partners of Deloitte, the biggest CPA firm in the world. And they said, wow, could you write us a little map of how to read these things? Because they're nothing like business.
I'd love to, actually. Thank you.
All right. So that's the summary of the general fund in 21. The audit.
Oh,
update-
wait. Before we go to the audit, can we get a scorecard of this that makes sense of we had $1 million in extra revenue. We had $1 million on the savings side, which is about 2.75% of our budget, which is bigger than the increase we asked the taxpayers for in savings and extra revenues. We got 400,000 that might offset that. So that brings us down to 2.25, whatever percentage that can be. So can we see like a scorecard? And then for the next meeting, can we see what are the plans for this money down the road, this $2 million that we have sitting out here, other than the 400,000 that we've talked about with these 4 items? Is that going to go directly to the general fund? Are we going to, how much are we going to put in non-reoccurring? Are we going to put some of this towards the debt bubble? How are we going to handle that along with, I think, Steve, you're working on the AARPA funds, the 1.9 in lost revenue. So we could have $3.9 million towards a debt bubble.
Yep. And so that's what I was talking about here, is developing the strategy with the draft statements. I think the best scorecard will be the draft statements, which should be less than 2 weeks out. Just the Excel portion of the funds, that I think that'll be the best scorecard. And then, once we pull it together, we can start saying, this is how we would like to do it. And that we're exactly on the same page as what is our strategy with this.
Yeah, because Glenn, you're right. We have a lot of moving parts here. We don't have the exact final numbers, but planning is very, very important, particularly looking at the debt bubble coming up. How do we want to address that?
Yeah,
I think, Steve, I'm not saying you're not on top of this. I think we just need to all be on the same page. And we have 3 months left together to get to work together. And if we can understand what we're doing, it may be in our best interest to figure it out before the election.
I agree with you. We'll do that.
Absolutely, because you have to remember that we this year we used a one-time $1.7 million of premium to balance the budget. We may or may not have that $1.7 million for 23. Depends on the market when we go out to bond in October.
But if we do, now we're talking, we have $5 million to handle the debt bubble with. I mean, we can handle this bubble, I think, with these funds that we have, if you guys plan it and figure out the path forward.
Right.
Correct. And that is
That's primary in our minds.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. I just wanted to add it up there. Thank you.
So could you send this deck, Marcia? It'll be helpful. Could you send them kind of going forward? I often find myself saying, I think Marcia said this, and then I don't have the paper to go back. So if we could get these on a regular basis, just kind of sent after you present, that'd be great. As well as the debt bubble deck that you did a couple months ago. I'd like to review that, and I couldn't find
I second that.
it.
that's not a problem. All right, so that's where we are in 2021, and we're quite a bit further ahead than we've been in past years. So that is good. Audit update, the auditors will be here on September 13th and 20th. We're working to get everything prepared for them, just like prepared for you. Also due September 3rd is information for our next debt offering. So they all kind of go hand in hand because they all use the same information. And that is due September 3rd, so we can start pulling that together.
Steve and Marcia, before we go any farther, when are we going out for the money for the second half of the school? Is that this year as well?
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to do that this year.
So
Yeah.
then we'll know about the premium when we do that, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Right now, we're planning on going, I believe in November is our current plan, so we will know.
Okay,
We are.
The sale is the date we would know, because it doesn't close until November, but the sale would be, I think it's October 6th is what the
That's right, Marcia.
the
So we
date
would know October 6th.
Included in that, Steve talked to the financial advisor about what bonds we can refinance. And there's limitations on, how many years we have to wait and so forth. But I think he got us, he's estimating $525,000 of savings from that.
okay.
Over the life or?
Over the life, 450,000 for us and 75,000 for WPCA.
That's over the 20-year, over what period?
WPCA is 8 years, and I think ours is 13 years.
Okay.
And that's after their costs. And we're looking, he's thinking at this time that the interest rate would be similar to last year. Last year, our net interest rate was 1.55%. And he's thinking somewhere between 1.5 and 1.7% this year for our bonds.
Very good.
We do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I agree.
That also will help with the debt bubble. And then we'll know exactly what the numbers are to fully size out the debt bubble.
Yep.
Remember, right now, we were looking, at least for part of it, between 4% and 6% interest rate.
Right, I agree. Yes, I totally agree. Everything's favorable right now. So everything is looking very favorable.
Everything is falling our way right now.
And Ryan, just so you know, that the new school, we have, I think, the oldest wooden school in Connecticut. 80 or 90 years old, we couldn't wait any longer. But our debt on the high school has not ended yet. So we have approximately 5 years where we have $2 to $2.5 million of a bump in spending to pay both these debts at one time. And that's what we call the debt bubble.
Yep, makes sense.
Right, good.
All right. Dan, do you have anything to add to the audit, Dan?
Just that Marcia is working on fees for the next engagement. Mahoney Sable's engaged for this 1 year, and then we're strategizing over how to either engage them or go out to bid for new ones. And Marcia's doing some research on that.
Okay, so then you're going to make a suggestion whether we don't go out to bid or go to bid.
Correct.
If we extend them at a certain rate that we feel is fair and that we have a working relationship, or is it time to go out to competitive bid?
That's exactly right. We'll be making a recommendation in one of the future meetings.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anything else for the audit? All right, we go on to new business. Steve, at your last selectmen meeting, you approved the concept of buying the fire truck. Can you explain that to us so everybody knows?
Yeah, so the fire department, as part of their plan, which we've all seen, and they've had for more than 6 years, I know that, calls for their fire engine 5 to be replaced in 2022. There is a lead time of 6 to 9 months to actually from the date of purchase to the date of delivery. So they had come to the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and said, we want to make this commitment this year. I met with Lou Menendez, the president, today. We were following up on this. So if we just run over the numbers real quick, the total cost of the fire truck will be $775,000. Center Fire will contribute $258,000 of their own money for the purchase. That leaves $517,000 that the town would pay. We have reserves in 21 of $100,000 and reserves in our 22 budget of $75,000 set aside for this. So that would leave the balance to be paid after using all those reserves of $342,000. The Board of Selectmen approved and it was unanimous that we would support the purchase of this vehicle, even though we don't want to create a special appropriation or go to a town meeting and go to the, all the way down that road, but that we would support it and strongly urge that it be put into next year's budget to be funded. And that's where the Board of Selectmen is. Now, the Board of Finance, I think, has to discuss it and hopefully make a similar commitment, although we cannot hold the new boards and new board, whether it's Selectmen or Board of Finance, to what our suggestion is, our strong suggestion is. I think, and I talked this over with Lou and the president and Andy Ellis, the fire chief. The town has always supported the fire companies, particularly when it comes to the purchase of equipment like this. They have a 30-year plan on this equipment. It's very detailed. It's very organized. Everybody's known about it. What the problem we have here is really the timing, and they probably should have looked at it and asked us in this past January, February, hey, we have a purchase a vehicle in next year's budget. We want the funding for that in next year's budget. But they didn't ask for it, so now we find ourselves where we are. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, everything you said, we've talked about. Absolutely. Right. So let's. What's Mr. Beecher's thoughts on this?
The only way we could actually, I talked to Tom about this. The only way we could actually commit this money is to have a special appropriation, move money from capital non-recurring, actually fund it this year to the boards. I think we've agreed we don't want to have a town meeting. We don't want to have, and rating agencies hate special appropriations and doing that. And we're just about to go out to the rating agencies to review our bond we're releasing. So I don't think that's a viable option. And Tom said, yeah, exactly what I said to you. You can make a commitment and your desire known to the new boards, what you want, but they can't be beholden to what we say we want today. So I would think both boards would support this fully, regardless of what the makeup is next year.
Yeah, I agree. The problem is, what happens if the Board of Finance says no next year?
They could do a couple of things. The fire company has enough funds that they could purchase it outright. They could, or they could get a loan from Union Savings or Newtown Savings Bank. I think it would be a very difficult thing to do. I think that the town would be seen as reneging on a long-term agreement that the fire company and the town has, but they could still pay for it. I mean, they wouldn't be, come to delivery date and I don't have the money. They do have the money.
That's good to know.
I'm sorry?
I mean, that's good to know. It's not the route that we want them to take, but they're not going to end up defaulting on something if it came down to that, which hopefully it wouldn't.
They do fundraising every year. They're very careful with their money, so they could fund this, but they would consider it, I don't think, they would consider it a complete lack of cooperation and faith on the part of the town, which I would understand, because for years we said we support you. And when it comes to it, and the Board of Finance has been as strong as any board, saying if you need it, we know about it well ahead of time, we'll do it. And the other consideration there is, remember that everybody's insurance rates could change slightly because the NFPA and the insurance companies don't allow a truck that's more than 20 years old to be considered in the overall plan of how the town supports fire suppression and putting fires out. I don't know how much that money would be, but each resident might be charged a little bit more once they get their insurance bill. It's a small thing, but it's something they brought up.
Okay. Ricky, you have any comments?
Yeah, sorry. If we have enough in capital non-recurring, let's say in November or December even, would we still need a special appropriation, even though it's going to be essentially a capital item?
Yes, I think we would, because this was not specifically mentioned and it wasn't in any of the bonding or anything. This is taking capital non-recurring money for a new project. And my opinion is we could check again with town attorney that we would have to do a special appropriation,
Okay.
even if we're taking out a capital non-recurring.
Dan, you're next.
Me?
Yeah, what's your comments and thoughts on this, on how to move it forward?
No, I think we're on the right path. We talked about it last month. I think we're doing what we need to do.
All right, Eileen?
You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm not sitting by myself in the office. Yeah, it's that whole bit of what steps do we take next? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that we all support this measure and we want to do it, but it's the technicality of it. I mean, I feel better knowing that if push came to shove, that they have the money available, even though it's not, they've been buying the smaller apparatus while we've been handling the bigger stuff. But at least that money exists, that it's not going to cause a default type situation or anything like that. So I guess I'm still not 100% sure how we can move forward, because they need our commitment in order to move forward with the order, right?
Yeah, they would actually, be betting that future boards will support them as past boards have.
So they can place the order with that.
Mandy told me he would have to talk to his board of directors,
Okay.
right, to see if they're willing to move forward without the full final appropriation from the town,
Okay.
and then come back to me. They're having a meeting this week, I believe.
I mean, we know in general, big ticket items like the school project, nothing can move forward until the town has approved the referendum or appropriation. Right. So I just want to make sure that we're following the letter of the law on this.
All right. Brianna?
So they have a meeting next week where Andy could potentially ask the board if they're comfortable moving forward with the purchase without, a hard and set in stone motion. And I believe from our last meeting, we had to build it by September, or he had to put the order in by September.
Yeah, they want to place the order by end of September.
So if maybe, I think we're all on the right path. Good to know that the fire department could afford it if need be, that there's a loan option if need be. It would be super upsetting, obviously, if different people and that were here next year for the budget wouldn't support, the fire department. But I guess if Andy asked the board and they came back feeling comfortable that they could order it just on the history of the town and everything that we've agreed upon and what we've always done for them, maybe we could discuss it again. I could put it on as old business at our next meeting and we could just revisit it again, knowing that the board said, hey, we're good with it. And just know that moving forward, it's been talked about publicly. It's on a, recorded meeting. These are our thoughts and feelings.
Right.
So last month I talked about putting together that I was going to take the lead on putting together kind of a list of Board of Finance intentions or whatever that we could hand off to the next board if it was a lot of newcomers. And I am in the process of doing that. I'm just going to solicit some input from the rest of the board on what should be on that that list, and certainly this fire truck would be high on the list. Like, it, again, wouldn't hold anybody to it, but will, in very strong terms, would say this is what was discussed, this is what was understood, this is what our intention would be. We would hope it would be honored.
Yep, I think that's a good idea. I'm on board with that. So if you could, when you get it ready, if you could share it with us, it'd be appreciated.
Absolutely.
Ryan, you have any thoughts on this?
I do. So I reviewed the meeting. I'm up to speed with the situation. I guess one question I have is, I mean, the risk is obviously the new board does not support this, but we also have the ARPA funds that will be available next year. Is that something that could be potentially used towards funding this fire truck? I mean, I would assume, I don't know all the legalities around ARPA, but I mean, the American Rescue Package, I mean, you think it's an infrastructure package. You would think a fire truck would apply. Is that something that I know?
Yeah, okay, so let's go through that because it does get very complicated. The interim final rule is 151 pages long, Ryan, on what you can and cannot spend the money on. For capital projects, they specifically say you can do broadband, sewer, and water projects. That's it. Nothing else can be a capital project. But we've done an analysis, Marcia's done it, where is a portion of the interim final rules that allow you to recoup what they call lost revenue. And they have a formula using a 4.1% growth rate in your overall spending year over year over year. And Marcia's done the calculation for that. And if her calculation is correct, that means we could claim 1.9 million of the 5 million we're getting as lost revenue. That would free that 1.9 million up to do whatever we wanted with it because it's a lost revenue and we can apply it anywhere we want. I think we should absolutely pursue that because it gives the town a lot more flexibility on what we can and cannot do. We're going to have, we're going to ask our auditors to just look at, because they're really good at this, to look at what Marcia's done and get a second opinion as to the calculation she's made. Do they agree with it? Because then we have to file with the government and say, hey, this is lost revenue and here's how we arrived at it. We don't want them coming to us in 5 years and saying, you miscalculated. It's not 1.9 million, it's zero. You have to give us some money back. So we're being very, very careful about that. But in that sense, if we could use the lost revenue, then yeah, we could use that money for any purpose we want.
Yeah, because I would think a new board coming in, obviously they're you know, if people are against this, they're sensitive to raising the tax rate, right? So, but if you already have funds appropriated for it, I mean, I would think it would be hard for someone to say, yeah, we don't want to support the fire department at all, and we don't want to use these ARPA funds if we had that available to use them towards this. So, I mean, I think personally, like you said, seems like there's a lot of options. And I would find it hard to believe a new member would vote, you know, to not give the fire department this.
I think you're right.
All right, I'll close out before we go further on this. One, can we show our commitment by giving them the reserve money that we currently have this year in our account towards this vehicle?
Yes, absolutely, we could.
So we could appropriate the 100,000 that we have towards a new vehicle.
Yeah, the money's already dedicated for that, so we can write him a check in a couple of weeks. And
so we could make a motion tonight. I know we can't appropriate that money tonight because it has to go through the Board of Selectmen first before it comes to us. But we can make a motion tonight to support the motion passed by the Board of Selectmen at your previous Board of Selectmen meeting in regards to the fire truck 5.
I would change that a little bit. This money has already been appropriated.
No, I'm talking about your motion that you passed a motion at your last meeting to support this.
Right.
I'm saying we can mirror your motion.
Yep.
To support, just to say the exact wording you guys use to keep us all on the same legal page.
Yep.
On a secondary note, we could give them 100,000 towards the purchase of a new vehicle, which would, if they ended up, the new board voted it down, they would have $100,000 already towards that new vehicle.
No, we can give them 175,000.
Well, this is what I'm saying. Can we?
121 and 75 and 22. That money's already appropriated. So if they decide to buy a truck, I think we would go through the process and say, Board of Selectmen, we have this money, just so everybody's aware, we're paying the fire company 175,000 that was appropriated.
So that would bring them already down to that 300,000 for next year,
Yep.
regardless of who's voting on what.
Right, it would bring it down to 342, that's correct.
Is that something you would consider?
Yes, absolutely.
So we can all wrap this up at our next meeting we'll make a motion to mirror your motion of the support. Correct? And then you can come to us and ask us to appropriate the 175 towards a new vehicle.
No, I think you're missing me. The money has already been appropriated.
Okay, so what do we have to do? I'm
Nothing.
sort of,
We just, come to us and tell us, we're buying the truck. We'd like the reserve money that you put aside. And I think just to be careful, the Board of Selectmen would say, we're appropriating this, we're sending this money, and we get the Board of Finance to agree. Just so it's on record, everybody knows what we did with it.
We would probably do it as a transfer from the reserve to an expenditure account.
That makes sense,
Okay.
Glenn?
yeah. Other board members on my idea, do you think it's the right way, the wrong way, or what's your opinion?
I mean, we're not appropriating money that's not already intended for that.
Right.
And
It's
we're
already in the
just
budget.
verbally supporting the idea. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Dan,
Sounds good.
Ricky,
I'm good.
Brianna,
I agree.
Ryan?
I'm good.
All right, I think, Steve, you sort of know what has to happen, and then also if you could give us the language that you used for your motion for our next meeting.
Will do.
That way we're in line with the same wording, so nobody could say, oh, the Board of Selectmen did this and the Board of Finance said that.
Yep. That's a good
And
idea.
we're gonna show our commitment by giving them the 175 that we already have as part of what this board can do.
Yep.
Sorry, and just so I got it right, so the total cost is 775. The center fire has 250 to contribute,
258.
258. We have the 175 in reserve.
Correct.
So the town sorry, I'm not looking at I'm not actually doing that. So the,
The town would have an
42.
obligation of
okay, so
342,000.
that was taking into account the reserve. That was my question. Thank you.
And generally, Eileen, too, then the next year's budget, the new board is gonna put 100,000 into that fund again
Yeah.
anyway. So
Yeah.
really, we're talking about a couple $100,000 in the long run of this,
Right.
in the big picture of schemes, if we do the money now.
Yep.
That's why I thought about that way I did.
Mhm.
All right. Everybody good on this?
Yep.
All right. The next thing we put on there was about virtual meetings and meeting in person. It's my opinion that we should meet via Zoom until the mask mandate is lifted, because I think it's hard for people to hear us through masks if we were to meet in person. I think it's just difficult to understand. So I think it's better for people to be able to see, or hear us without masks so we can communicate clearly. Any other opinions on this?
No, I agree. I mean, I think I know we all have kids in different schools, and some of us have kids that can't be vaccinated. So our exposure levels are all different just in the fact of living at home. So I completely support virtual meetings.
Dan,
Yeah, it's the right thing to do.
Ricky,
I agree.
Brianna,
I agree.
Ryan,
I agree.
Steve,
I agree 100%.
but you understand, right? I mean, masks is hard to understand. We're speaking a lot of numbers. I
It's
want
very
people to
good.
hear us clearly.
It's a very, very good point, and it's much clearer on the Zoom than it is on the recordings.
Right, exactly. Instead of, like I say, us speaking through masks and everything, I think just to get our word across. So I think we're gonna put that, the public now has a record that the Board of Finance will be working virtually until the mask mandate is lifted. Okay? Do we have to make a motion on that, Steve, or can we just state it?
I don't think so. You can if you want.
No, I think just stating it's enough. We're good on that. All right. we don't have any other items to come before the board, since it's a special meeting. So Steve, you're gonna help us out on a fire truck and all that for next meeting?
Yep.
All right, is there anybody here for public comment? Hearing none, who's making the Mulvaney motion?
I think Ryan has to.
All
I agree.
right.
I agree.
I make a motion to join the meeting.
Do I hear a second?
I will second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Good
Thanks,
night, everybody.
Everyone.
Night.
Bye.